It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And today we are discussing Kitchen by Yoshimoto Banana.
Indeed.
This is a slight departure, even more of a departure than Taiwan Travelogue, in that this one, well, let's do the plot first and then we can go into whether it has wizards or lesbians in it.
Yeah. Do you want to do the plot or shall I?
I can do the plot.
Go for it.
Actually, I'm not sure if I can do the plot because I don't think I remember anybody's names.
Eriko
okay,
is the mother, Yuichi is the guy, and Mikage is the protagonist.
So Mikage is a young woman living in Japan in the late 80s, and she has lost her parents at an early age, and she has been living with her grandparents. Her grandfather died a while ago. Her grandmother just passed on, and she's dealing with that when she's dropped out of school in order to contend with her mourning. But a friend of hers from school catches up with her and asks her to come live with him and his mother while she's getting her life together. And so she does that. And then later on, later on she has to go find him. And that's sort of the extent of the plot. Like it's tough to, there are a few details that I should not reveal pre-spoiler zone, but that's pretty much the extent of what this book is.
There's not an intricate plot here. It's very much about characters and themes.
Yes, this is a mood piece, and it's in large part about the prose. So, in case you weren't getting that from the description, we are in the realm of literary fiction here, and this was a popular piece of literary fiction when it was published, first in Japan in the late 80s, and in America or in the English-speaking world in the early 90s.
Yep. Are there wizards?
No.
No. Though it's funny, there is you can argue that there's at least magic in the companion novella at the end, which has completely different characters. But no, there's no wizards in the main story.
Yeah. And lesbians?
I mean, Eriko sort of.
I don't think that we ever...
Eriko is a woman who was married to a woman.
That is true.
She wasn't identifying as a woman while she was married to a woman, but she is a woman who was married, who has only ever loved one person, been in love with one person in her life, and that was another woman.
Yes. So there is, at the very least, some gender here.
Yes.
And I think that we could call Eriko a trans lesbian. Although these are labels.
She's a bar hostess, so like trans. There's some queerness in this book.
Yes, there's some queerness, there's some gender. We'll get further into discussing the way that these labels don't entirely match up to the contemporary reality of the situation. So no wizards, a sort of lesbian, and there's not really much in the way of conflict in this book either. So it's not really a wizards versus lesbian story
at all.
So why are we covering it?
Well, it makes a good companion piece to Taiwan Travelogue.
Yeah, we were reminded of it when we were reading Taiwan Travelogue, and we thought that we would go ahead and do this because...
Also, it's our podcast and we can do what we want.
Yeah, pretty much. It's also like, we're getting up to the fifth year of the podcast, and, we have a Q&A episode coming up. We have the Weasleys coming up as whenever we can get around to doing them. But we're also just sort of feeling out what we're doing with the rest of the podcast, because I think that it's fair to say at this point that the Wizards versus Lesbians microgenre has had its moment.
Well, part of the problem is that at this point, it is established enough that there's actually tons of books to choose from, and most of them aren't very good.
Yes, so we have to wait around for the Wizards versus Lesbians deconstructions, for the next
Mm.
real, for the next real juicy ones that we can get into, which we're actually starting to see in the short stories that we did in our last short
Yes.
story episode. I think that there were definitely a couple of Wizla's deconstructions in there. So we should be seeing the novels that are deconstructing Wizla's coming down the pipe shortly, I imagine. Um, but isn't it exciting to watch these things happen in real time and to document them?
And in the meantime, we're just going to cover whatever books we feel like reading,
Yeah, pretty much exactly. Uh,
which will still continue to often feature wizards and or lesbians.
and lesbians and Asia, because these are our interests. So that being said, why should you read this particular book?
I think it's enjoyable. It's short. The translation does a good job of sort of conveying the liveliness of the prose. It's an enjoyable read, if somewhat, if not as cheerful as perhaps the tone implies. And also, it's a really good portrait of Japan right before the bubble bursts.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly the list that I have. If there is such a thing as like a cozy book about death and mourning, this is it. Um, and I might want to talk a little bit after we get to the spoiler zone about the term cozy, and
Yeah.
whether, I mean, we can't use the current genre term cozy to describe this because it's ahistorical, but um, the
Ahistorical, and honestly, I think that this one is. I mean, there's things in this that happen in this book that you could not get away with in a cozy.
right. It's just interesting because the tone of this one is very warm and very comforting, even while it's mostly about death and the difficulty with connecting with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so in a way, it is comforting in that, and it's also quite short.
Yeah.
So it's not going to take you too much time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it is not difficult to read at all. It goes fast. Um, why shouldn't you read this book?
Well, this also sort of comes up in the content warnings, but the trans woman gets brutally murdered. Sorry
Sure
for the
does.
spoiler, but
I was just cozy. As I was saying. Uh, yeah,
right, which you could not get away with in a contemporary cozy. Um,
it happens off screen, but it is definitely an important thing that happens in this book.
yes, and also, I mean, we discussed this book in class like over 20 years ago, in our modern Japanese literature class, and there was a nice, I still remember the very heated discussion over whether or not this book was depressing, because it is about, sort of the fundamental alienation of the human condition and the way that grief can make you completely isolated from everyone around you.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's a book about mourning, and like if you're dealing with mourning, then it can be then maybe do you want stories about that right now to help you sort of think your way through it or feel your way through it, or don't you? You could do worse than this. It's because again it has it's very interested in what makes life worth living, even given everything else. Um, but also, I guess one reason that you might not want to read it if you are a sci-fi fan is that if you actually wrote down the things that happen of consequence in this book, it's a short list, and the death
Yes, I will say,
of people who we
yes.
care about is pretty much at the top of that list.
Yes. Also, actually, reasons why you should read this book is if you like food and you like reading about people who like food. Alternately, if you like comfortable couches and you like reading about people who like comfortable couches, it's very interested in the pleasures of everyday living. And if you like that, you will, this book has a lot to offer. And if you don't, then this book is going to be very boring, I think, and or depressing.
Yeah, no, there are like three main characters in this book, but there I would say that the five most important characters include Bowl of Katsudon and Big Couch, and so you have to have room in your heart for that, um, if you're going to be invested. So, having said that, yeah, the big content warning, as we discussed, uh, I would say like it's a book from 1988 which has trans characters in it. Um, it's really not a bad scenario. Like it's among the best case scenarios for that. But you know how you feel about that will vary. The English translation uses slurs, which would not be used in a translation today, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
And uh, and as we said, our Eriko is murdered by a stalker off screen. Um, so we're burying our gaze here.
Yep.
But apart from that, I think that there's nothing particularly uh, content warning worthy in here.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So, having established that, shall we get into it?
Yeah.
Yoshimoto banana, right worthy of praise. Yoshimoto banana is kicking off this podcast next phase. We're going to the spoiler zone. All right. So where to begin? Shall we talk about the bubble to start with?
Sure, let's start with the bubble. Because it is, this is a book that is actually written right and published right before the bubble bursts. And it is funny the extent to which you can also read, it also reads like something that was written in the lost decades about the world right before the bubble bursts. Like it's so you can feel the doom hanging over. Like it just, in the way that there's this moment where like Mikage is looking at Eriko and Yuichi's spending habits and going, this isn't really healthy or sustainable. I'm still, but I'm going to ignore that and enjoy my, pretty juice glass with the bananas on it that they got when they also randomly got excited and bought a juicer. And, if that had been written 5 years later, it would feel too heavy-handed.
Yeah, no, the sort of, I mean, not to be the material conditions guy, but like, I think that it's plausible to say that another one of the characters in this book, along with Big Couch and Bowl of Katsunon, is the economy, which is sort of informing everything that happens in a number of different ways. One of those ways is that this is a time of extraordinary prosperity, and a time, like, as far as times go, a time when being a complete orphan without a completed college education in your early 20s is not necessarily going to be going to have the same sort of consequences that it would in other less prosperous times. It's very easy for, like, we are interested in telling a story where the feeling of isolation and aimlessness and depression and mourning is the most important thing about this story, in when other times it would be like, okay, how am I going to eat,
Yeah, though I will say that that's also a post-bubble thing. I mean, Japan has way higher savings rates than basically any other country, and she just she inherited a little bit of money from her grandmother. I mean, some of this is about those periods in your life where you've got enough savings that you can just sort of get by and be aimless.
Mhm.
You've come into a little bit of money and you're not sure what you're going to do next, and so you're just out of a relationship, or you've just lost somebody, or you've just quit your job, and you can like, I think it captures that sort of brief grace period limbo where you have to get moving because that money is going to run out. And so, like, that is not entirely, I mean, that you can still happens today. Heck, I spent one of those periods of my life just post 2008 financial crash.
I suppose that is true. um, I get it. It does more directly inform, like, the ways in which she is able to look for meaning. Which,
Yeah.
as you point out, in the like one of the first ways that she's able to look for meaning is in nice things, um,
Mm-hmm.
including large couch.
And banana juice glass. It's really funny. I have not read this book since in over 20 years, and I still remembered the juice glass, but I remembered it as a pineapple juice glass. I have no idea why.
Well, because we don't really drink banana juice. Uh,
I guess so, yeah.
that's not really a thing that we do, so it makes more sense for a juice glass to have a juiceable fruit on it. Uh, but the when
But like
she
it's interesting to me that over 20 years, like the couch and the juice glass, like these consumer goods have stuck with me, which I think really speaks to the ability of the writer to really convey the joy that material possessions can bring in a way that isn't about greed, but is about, I mean, you know, these that really is like the material possessions in our life really can represent larger things. It's that's not just a symbolic novel thing. And like the couch represents this sort of sense of rest and a chance to regroup, and this juice glass represents her being welcomed into this household. And like that's also true of actual material objects. We have the things that represent a lot more than sometimes even the person who provided them realizes.
this is like a thread in Japanese art and literature and culture, from sort of like super flat aesthetics, thinking about, like, considering every object in like a Katamari Damacy kind of a way, where you are, where the world is full of things, and we're focusing very, very much on like each discrete object and type of object and its like decorative and symbolic potential, uh, to like the way that that's sort of ramified into American pop culture conception of Japan via like Marie Kondo. I was about to say Koji Kondo, who is a different person. Please throw away more of your stuff, because happiness does not come from objects. Consumerism. Okay.
Yes, of course. Marie Kondo is all about getting rid of things. I mean,
Well,
there's
but
also picking. There's
it's the
also
other
like
side of the
picking the
same
things that
coin.
mean to you, right?
Right. It's like the thing should spark joy. Like the banana glass is not just the banana glass. It is, this symbol and has this memory attached to it, and is thus worthy of cherishing. And the excess of things is the thing to avoid, which is, going back to the bubble, is the sort of the juicer is the other side of this, right?
Right. Of course, the juicer is what provides the juice for the glass. So
Yes, and what is a kitchen if not an ever expanding collection of unitasking gadgets? Or maybe that's one way that a kitchen can be. We're invited to think about like the the. I mean, our main character Mikage's like raison d'etre is that she loves kitchens. She loves what they represent, but she also just loves them as collections of objects.
well, and
Uh,
also, I mean, and also she loves them as a place where you prepare food, and like she's somebody who's very interested in both the
we say
preparation and
this
eating of
book
food. It's
does
both
not contain magic,
personally
but
and
good
symbolically
cats and dogs very
meaningful
time
to her. It's
sensitive as
creatively
foods go.
satisfying.
The idea that it would still be like
And
life-changingly
so
delicious
she
after
likes
a
kitchens
2-hour
because
cab ride
each kitchen
is a
kind
little
of tells a
far-fetched.
story of the food that's been prepared there.
But then again, maybe it's just the fact of her bringing it to him in this way that charges it with and we another kind of
Mm-hmm.
get a sort of a variety of exemplar kitchens over the course of the book. We're not sort of interested in like judging them in terms of their quality or even their moral quality.
Mm-hmm.
It is once again just sort of allowing the object to be what it is.
Yes, I mean she opens with basically saying that she loves beautiful gleaming kitchens, and she also loves the kitchens that are so dirty that they turn your slippers black.
Mm-hmm. So, we have to we have to sort of evaluate the book against this background of like economic, you know, exuberance and the dread of a burst and losing it. But um, that sort of aspect is sort of embodied within Eriko, um, which is it's one of those things that is maybe a little bit uncomfortable to unpack, uh,
Mm-hmm.
because so Eriko's deal is that she was when she married Yuichi's mother, her family did not approve, and
Well, she married. I mean, that was like her sort of quasi foster sister.
yes, classic Japanese media here,
Right.
and but she was disowned. She went and like but was able to create a new life for herself and a new gender for herself.
Yeah, well,
And,
when she lost her wife to after she lost her wife to cancer,
mhm,
um, she transitioned.
yeah, and so we should probably talk a little bit about like this figure of the sort of the trans bar hostess. Um,
Yes.
and the word in Japanese is okama, which is also used as a more broadly as a slur for homosexuals. Um, but the sort of the specific like okama bar hostess culture is its own thing. And I'd like to thank my friend Aster for answering some questions that I had about this, because I was looking at this and I was like, when growing up with anime that like we did,
Mm-hmm.
anime from the 80s and 90s, there's often this sort of stock comedy character. And this stock comedy character appears in this book also because Eriko is not the only trans woman who we see in this book. There's also one of her bar hostess employees who meets with Mikage later on,
Who I
to
believe inherits the bar after Eriko is murdered.
who inherits the bar, and she is this stock character, or it's like this sort of very silly, very sort of like feminine, fluttering older woman who is also more or less obviously trans, depending on how mean spirited the media in question wants to be with it. Um, and you found these stock characters like all the way through, like in not in a sort of it it's a different, like, it's not the way that trans characters from this era were handled in American media. I'll put it that way. It tends not to be hateful. It's more just like, oh, here's one of our like sort of strange stock neighborhood figures. This is just an archetype.
Yeah, it's like the grumpy old man. You've got your grumpy old man next door, and you've got the snot nosed kid, and you've got the Okama bar hostess.
Right.
And like the funny thing is, in the '90s, this felt super progressive and exciting to be like, wow, here's a queer character on screen, and they're not evil.
Yeah. We can, like, I think probably the most, famous incidents of this in stuff that made it to America and was popular in America, it was in Tokyo Godfathers.
I was just about to say that one, yeah. Which is it's a little bit later, and it's from a director who deals with a lot of trans themes in his work. So it's not a perfect example, because like I think that character exists partly to be a comment on that type of character,
Right. We have
but
once again come to the deconstruction,
yeah,
which is, and so many things in anime and in an American understanding or in an otaku's understanding of Japanese pop culture comes from getting to the deconstruction first
yes,
and then working backward.
yes.
Uh, as far as I understand, like what this cultural figure actually was at the time in 80s and 90s, and like back into the 60s, is that these are generally construed to have been more akin to trans women than to drag queens.
I mean, it's from an era where those lines weren't so clean anywhere, not in
Right.
Japan and not in the U.S.
Right. That sort of stratification hadn't happened yet. Um, there are not like distinct lines here. Uh, but there was also a sort of a, and this happened a little bit in America back in the sort of back in the 60s, where it was like, oh, this woman used to be a man. How isn't it amazing what science has done? You know, like,
Right.
isn't this a cool new feature of modernity that we've got going here? And I think that lasted sort of longer in Japan than it did in America. There was less of of a sort of conservative backlash to that, and it's the and like so you had like shows from the 80s. There's a a they're like I was showed in this clip of like a variety show which had a segment in the 80s called like Mr. Lady, which was basically about, you know, hey, check out these trans women. Aren't they really good at being women? Like it's like
It's this period where it can just be a curiosity and not a moral panic.
yeah. And I think if anything, like the moral panic aspect of it has come to Japan now, or is more present now than it was before, and it's not from a place of like, you know, moral conservatism. It's more part of like the birth rate panic. I realize I just said the same thing twice.
Right.
It's more of like the, you know, Shinzo Abe doesn't want you to be gay, so you can, because we need to be making more babies, kind of a deal. And you know, see what he got. But for further reading on this subject, there is a book called Okama no Nihonshi, or An Okama's History of Japan by Yamaguchi Shiho. There is the movie A Funeral Parade of Roses from the 60s, which is about Okama bar culture. And folks who are interested in this subject generally and what it means, there are some resources for you. But having said that, what the character of Eriko specifically, Eriko is not like sort of the figure of fun character. Eriko is a different kind of like person. And I think this character was very sort of pop culturally significant in Echoes, because it's not the only show that I've seen where like one of the main characters, or show or book or Japanese thing, where like one of the characters, oh, my mom died and I'm being raised by my trans woman, you know, other mother.
Uh-huh.
And I do wonder whether this book was so influential that sort of became its own kind of thing. Picture, if you will, the old butterfly meme, but it's Isaac looking at a total of two things and saying, is this a deep-seated cultural phenomenon in Japan? It keeps happening. It's not the sort of the flibber to gibbet, you know, like Nathan Lane in the Birdcage kind of, you know, figure. It's a different thing where it's like this woman is just like this relentless ball of energy, and you know, and is making her own life through sheer willpower, kind of a figure.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, other than, yeah, I mean, her death is tragic, but in the sort of the first, so the book is divided into part one and part two, and Eriko dies between part one and part two. And particularly in part one, I mean, she's kind of this aspirational figure. I mean, like Mikage's big dilemma in part one is, how do I continue to live now that I have no family left in the world?
Mm-hmm.
Now that, you know, I've always known that one day I would be entirely alone. Now I'm entirely alone. How do I live in this world? And like Eriko exists something as an aspirational figure, because she's somebody who, you know, lost her family for, you know, to keep, for the sake of her wife, and then she loses her wife. And she has an infant son, but like she has, you know, nobody to rely on. She has no like support network, and she just completely reinvents herself. She goes, all right, well, I'm going to transition. I'm going to open a club. And she has this like, she's somebody who's so fundamentally alive in the face of death, and abandonment, that she kind of is able to pull Mikage out of this, just like with the sheer force of her energy, and also, with the son that she has raised with these values. And that, and this is why her death in between creates the crisis of part two, which is, okay, but, when you lose your rescuer,
Mm.
how, now suddenly her son is in the same position, and doesn't even have her as a model because A, she is dead, and B, she died in such a horrible way.
Yes, and I think there are a couple of ways that you can read this. They're like, it's literary fiction. There are like four or five different ways that you can read
Right.
this. And of course, one way that you can read this is this character happened to die, and we're interested in the effects of this character's death on the other characters. But it's also like, as every object in the in the story has, well, what does this represent, and why is this significant? We also have why, in addition to just being a human being that these people loved and relied on, is this person significant? And I think that with this sort of, if you want to do a like historical economic reading, there is like, she is a person who is very entrepreneurial. She is a person who has, as you said, like rebuilt herself from the ground up in a very modern and like uh, exciting way, and that turns out to be unsustainable, and we have to figure out what happens after she is dead. Um, Although that isn't actually like a reading that I am super persuaded by. I think it's
I
present.
Yeah, I don't think it's actually it's necessarily unsustainable. I mean, I guess part of the tragedy is that the same kind of drive and independence that led her to be able to do this is also what leads her to underestimate the threat of her stalker.
Mm.
Um, but so I guess in that way it's unsustainable. But also, I mean, part of the point of this book is our sort of interdependency, and so it's the things that made Eriko successful are her ability to form relationships with other people, even after she's lost all these others. And the thing that kills her is when she fails to do that.
Yes, I think that's definitely also, and that's a more persuasive like way to read her death. I think that the two things that we just mooted are also interrelated,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that one of the things about the bubble period and the media that comes out of the bubble period, we, there are a lot of very famous, a lot of very famous works that are all about that inability to connect with, sort of from an otaku's perspective, Evangelion being high on the list, is like, what situations lead to these cultural moments where connection between people is difficult. And um, one of them is this, and I think that one aspect of it is this prosperity, which allows you to be isolated, um, without needing to reach out to other people. That the sort of that the economic conditions cushion you in such a way that it is far easier to not develop these social connections, um, which is not, I would say, the conditions that obtain now, because we are being atomized deliberately for different reasons. But I think is a possible reading of what the what the prevailing feeling was there, because there, even in this sort of,
I, I don't know. I think that there is something alienating about prosperity in this, but I don't think that it's about not needing to rely on others. I mean, I think part of the point of this book is that you always need to rely on others. Um, I think it's more that the prosperity is alienating because when other people's lives are good, they don't understand why you're so isolated.
hmm,
Like when you're grieving or when you're depressed or just like when you're dealing with the trauma of having lost your parents at a young age, um like there is this, and everyone around you is excited about their bright futures because they're all in college and during a bubble, so like the possibilities are limitless. That is alienating because nobody, you're a drag.
Oh, it's in my eyes, it's in my eyes. Out of step with the world. One good thing about being miserable in 2026 is that so many people can relate.
Like, I mean, there's a thing where she briefly she has that chat with her ex-boyfriend who very specifically they broke up when her grandmother's illness got serious. And now that her grandmother is dead, he reconnects to be like, did you really just move in with a guy? He's sort of offended, I guess, that she's moved on so quickly, and maybe slightly worried. And there's this moment where she's like, "Do you still have feelings?" Where they exchange a look, and she's trying to figure out if he still has feelings for her, and he makes it very clear without saying anything that no, he doesn't. And like basically their relationship was broken by she's in crisis mode. Her last family member is dying, and he just wants a normal college life.
Yes.
And even after the crisis is passed, and they could theoretically start things up again if it was just a matter of him not being able to handle the crisis. And she's even sort of interested in exploring that, and he's not, because she's still fundamentally isolated from him, because she knows what loss is and he doesn't. For him, loss is, it's embarrassing that my ex-girlfriend just moved in with another guy.
Right. No, I think that you're correct in that, and that is sort of the central theme that we get as we are moving into the second half of the book, where the reason that there is a potential future for Mikage and the boy is that Yuichi, thank you. The reason that there is a potential future for Mikage and Yuichi is that obviously they both are in this other part of this. They're in that sort of shadow world where they both understand loss. But the first half of the book is Yuichi doing a gesture to help Mikage that is, on the face of it, kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's like, hey, we had like a class together, and also I liked your grandmother because she bought flowers from me every week.
Yes, she was a favorite customer at my shop.
Right, like mostly he was a friend of her grandmother's.
But that's also like, quotidian human connection of the we see each other every day and
right.
Bother to remember each other's names and care about each other, kidney. The people who don't understand the magnitude of her loss, view this as like a crazy thing. Both like her ex-boyfriend and his ex-girlfriend are, interpret this as
his becomes ex-girlfriend, partly because he has this girl move in with him and his mom.
Right, are not able to get why this gesture not only makes sense internally, but is like essential in saving her life, or in helping her to continue to live.
Right. Well, and part of it is that, even though Yuichi hasn't lost his mother yet, he's in, he recognizes that one day he will be in the position that she is in.
Yes, he's already lost a parent.
He's already lost a parent, but this is important, as and I think more so in Japan, where there sort of tends to be slightly closer extended family networks, but really is also true here. He doesn't have anyone else.
Right.
Right? Like, he doesn't have any aunts and uncles. He doesn't have any grandparents who he's in touch with. Eriko was an orphan, and his mother was disowned. He has one person left in his life, just like, a month before the novel begins, Mikage had one person left in her life.
Mm-hmm. And so under those circumstances, like, we do these magical things to widen the circle of our families, beyond blood. We do these like strange rituals. We do these like outsized acts of generosity, or culture breaking moments that people will that become touchstones in the same way that the objects become touchstones and symbols. And the second half of the book is her returning the favor to him. And the way that I think that the way that these two actions rhyme is very good because it demonstrates that it doesn't have to be like I'm letting you live rent free on my couch for months,
Right.
which is a very large gesture, which is only possible in, under certain circumstances and when there is the presence of a large couch.
Sometimes it's you take and it's not, it still isn't a cheap gesture that she does, but yeah, sometimes the big gesture is that you take a 2 hour taxi ride, so that you can bring somebody the best bowl of katsudon you've ever eaten in your life.
We say this book doesn't have fantastical elements, but good katsudon is very time sensitive as foods go. And the idea that it could get through a 2 hour car ride without the meat getting steamed limp and soggy is a little far-fetched. And I'm choosing to assume that it is the magic of her bringing it to him that restores it to deliciousness, particularly after she has to do parkour to break into his room. Yeah. And also, like, you have to break into his hotel at the end of it.
Right, breaking into his hotel to do so. It's like that's. Yeah. I remembered that she took the taxi halfway across Japan with the bowl of katsudon. I had forgotten that she then like has to break into his hotel room. So she like shows up standing on the roof overhang outside of his window, bleeding. It's covered in dirt and like holding her takeout bag, being like, "Look what I brought you. See, you're not alone in the world."
Yeah, and then so like there's a there's a mirror here. Like this will remind you of sort of the grand gesture style of romantic comedy, which, as a general matter, we distrust. I think.
Right. So I guess maybe we should dig into why this grand gesture to me feels extremely romantic. Not even in necessary, like, I don't actually care whether or not they get together. Like whether or not they start dating. It's romantic in a sort of sense of what a great thing to do for a person that you love, for however you define love. And so, why does this one work so well? And most of the time I go, well, that's not sustainable.
Well, I think one of the major difference is that, like, the grand gesture, as we understand it in these narratives, generally comes at the does not come at the beginning, of the relationship, but it comes at there's a crisis that has happened, or you're going to leave me, or things aren't working, or
we've decided we're not. We don't work, or often I've done something wrong.
It's like, fundamentally, I want something from you. Like I have done something wrong, or I need to change your mind. And so I'm
right. It's very specific, and I guess it is. It's always, I want you to be romantically and sexually involved with me.
Right. I need something from you, and therefore I'm going to do this as a kind of transactional thing, and you can say that, well, this demonstrates that you were wrong about me because I'm showing that I'm I'm a person who's capable of doing this. But, like, as you said, capable of doing this how many times? Like, will it take another crisis for you to do something like this again?
And also, I think you're right that, like, the transactionality of it robs a lot of the genuine, like, sentiment from the gesture, because it's like, well, if you knew that this wouldn't work, would you still do it?
Right, exactly. Whereas, like, I think one of the charms about, or the charming things about both of the gestures in this book is that neither of them really are thinking.
Right.
It's like neither of them are, it's both like I think that this would be a good thing to do for this person who I don't even know,
But with the couch thing, Eriko very specifically, like, sort of pulls Mikage aside and is like, so I gotta warn you, my son likes you. I cannot promise it is romantic. He mostly says that you remind him of his childhood dog.
Right. But it's exactly that sort of thing. It's like, this is a reflection of immediate emotion translated into action.
And I think that particularly with the katsudon, like, she does want something out of it, but she doesn't want something out of him like for her. What she wants is for him to experience the joy of this katsudon, and also for him to like feel less alone.
Yeah, yeah, but that is not something that she wants for herself. Apart from
Right.
like the
Other than like the vicarious joy of watching somebody else eat a delicious thing that you've just eaten.
sure, and and also the joy of doing something ridiculous, which I think is
Yes.
present, in both of these, is the like
Yes.
the joy of going over the top on a grand adventure.
Which is also kind of why Eriko transitioned. I mean, she doesn't have the classic. She's such a, just to go back to her briefly, she's such an interesting figure because she doesn't transition because she's always felt like a woman deep down inside, but also she always did feel somewhat alienated from herself and her body, and from being this like very attractive, charismatic young man. But like she transitions partly because she feels the need to make a grand gesture that that looks ridiculous but feels true. And
Yes,
that's also hey, granddaughter of the my favorite flower shop customer, come sleep on our couch for however long you need to, and also I'm going to take a taxi halfway across Japan to deliver some katsudon.
this is incidentally why I think that it's important to like look at these narratives about being gay and being trans that come from an era before these narratives were defined,
Codified.
codified.
Before
Yeah,
like before this is like acceptable standard narrative that you're expected to fit yourself into.
and like whether you're getting it right or getting it wrong as a writer writing about it depends on how close you hew to what is publicly understood to be the default trans experience or whatever,
Right. Or gay experience
or
or
gay experience or
whatever.
marginalized experience generally. And
Yeah.
like one of the things about human beings is that they are, so a lot of people feel the way that the standard narrative goes, and a lot of people don't, because we contain multitudes. But that is just a sort of an interesting thing about the way that this particular trans character is portrayed, like presumably by a cis woman, but
Yeah, but I mean part of the thing that I like about speculative fiction, I guess this is a way in which this sort of resonates with speculative fiction, is that I prefer stories that deal with, certainly my various axes of marginalization, metaphorically and symbolically, than the ones that actually, name identities and use the right buzzwords. And I think part of that is because, for me, it is more interesting to talk about the experience, what is the experience of being this way in a society, as opposed to there being one inherent experience of being this way. Like there's not like one inherent experience of being neurodivergent, but there are ways to discuss how the ways in which being neurodivergent makes you feel isolated or separate, or also helps you connect to other people. But that isn't focused on inherent features of the identity, but more what are the commonalities of experience. And that's where sort of stepping back and working on the symbolic layer tends to work better for me, and that's why I tend to like the older and often weirder stuff.
yes. Now let's head back to what the content of those gestures are. So let's head back to like what the content of these gestures are.
Yeah.
Because I think that this comes back to a thing that we have not like really discussed enough, which is that this book loves food. Oh boy. The our main character loves food. All these things take place in kitchens. The plot revolves around eating and feeding people and cooking.
And the job that she gets between in that interstitial between parts 1 and 2 is she becomes a cooking school assistant to like a celebrity chef, and that's also a fun bit, comparing her to her coworkers, are sort of upper class girls who went through the cooking school, and then she's a college dropout, but she's hungrier metaphorically and literally, and thus was able to land the third opening.
Yes. So I think that this functions in the narrative on a couple of different levels. One of which is, okay, we are dealing with depression, despair, isolation, mourning, like figuring out what the point is, whether we want to go on or not. The food represents food.
Yes.
The food represents that eating is good, and that
Yes.
and that having an appetite is
And that
good,
food
and
is
that like
delicious.
food is delicious, and there, if you're not alive, then you can't eat food anymore. Which I think is a significant and important point to continue to make.
Yes.
Second, food represents family. Like, to putting food on your family is like, an essential part of the whole, the way that we conceive of family relations. And this is about, well, we can use the incantations that create family on people who aren't related to us by blood. We can do strange and magical things to find new families, if we need to. And that, and I think that it's important that this, even though this is in some ways a romance, that it is not explicitly about the two of them creating a family together, as like husband and wife. It is about the ways in which they're exploring the ways of being connected in communities, and demonstrating these potentials for each other.
They're creating a family together, but the book is leaving it open what that family is going to be, whether that's going to be husband and wife or whether they're just going to be like best friends forever.
Right, exactly.
They're talking about moving in together, but they haven't actually, they very specifically, they're like, how are we moving in together? I don't know. Are we going to be sleeping in the same bedroom? That does not get resolved in this book because that's actually not important.
Right, that's not the point. This is not about a love story in the same way, although it is about love.
Yeah.
And so, and third, it's the food is, it is like the focus of these rituals and adventures that form like touchstones that bind people together and form shared memories that bind people together. That's a very wholesome and traditional theme, but sometimes wholesome and traditional themes are easier to accept if they come from an unfamiliar vector, like through a foreign lens. It makes them appear new. So you can wrap this one in a 50-year-old Japanese short novel and I'll swallow it like a pill in peanut butter, even though the Fast and Furious movies are essentially saying the same thing. Also, let's talk about the other story in this book. In many editions of this book, there's a novella called Moonlight Shadow, which is sort of contained as an afterword, which is not as successful.
I think that in some ways it sort of exists to make the theme, to really try to hammer home the themes of the novel.
Yeah, it predates the novel, I think, at least in terms of its publication, its initial publication. But
where its placement in the bound book.
Yeah, in the way that this anthology has been presented in some editions again.
Yeah,
including the one that is you're most likely to find in English, and that is a book with very similar themes. Like, we're dealing with the loss of a loved one. What can be done about it? And that book chooses to it chooses to make the sort of the magic of this ritual, of these rituals, like explicit. Like there's an actual ritual, and actual, at least subjective magic does take place. But it is also like, in the same way that like, we're doing the same themes louder and shorter.
Yes.
It's also like, but this is not about replacing the specific person that you lost. It's not about finding a new mother, or it does, it's not about finding a new lover even necessarily, because in that there is this kind of a gay inflected, honestly, relationship.
It is, no, there's it definitely, between our narrator and Urara, that definitely feels pretty lesbian, especially because at least in the translation, I wish I'd looked at the original. At least in the translation, Urara is never does give the gender of her dead lover.
Yes, it is very much a sort of, we are opening up these gestures, or we're opening up these structures to people who we couldn't have necessarily opened them up to. We have to perform a kind of magic in order to do that, because it does involve like a breaking of a very old and powerful like system and the replacement of this, like, you know, or the tinkering with this core part of human behavior. And this is possible to do, but it does require this sort of degree of intentionality and this degree of belief in your own ability to be magic in that way, to
Yes.
to not be the person that everybody else is, because you aren't the person that everybody else is, to extract meaning in a way that is derived ultimately from something that you've invented for yourself with the help of other people, or rather than with what you have, like, rather than history or nation or,
Yes.
you know, the default.
Okay, I do want to say one thing that I found really interesting about, you know, if you put the novel and the novella together, is that in the novel, Eriko's transition is a way of moving past grief.
Mm-hmm.
And in the novella, the little brother, what's his name? Hiroshi? Hiragi. He's wearing his dead girlfriend's school uniform, so he's cross-dressing, and that is a symbol of his inability to move on past grief. Like, it's really interesting to be like, okay, grief is a thing that can mess with your, you know, that gender is a way of exploring grief, but it doesn't have to mean one thing or the other. Sometimes
Right.
it means, you know, sometimes you're cross-dressing because you're stuck, and sometimes you're cross-dressing because actually that's how you move on.
Cross-dressing because you're stuck is unfortunately a thing that comes up a lot again in the various like animes that have to do with gender that I've seen. I'll do a little jingle to go through the list again, because I've definitely, you know, this is definitely also a trope that comes up. Again, I'm referring to mostly one guy, but I'm also referring to Sarazanmai. Tomihiko Morimi's the author in question, and the ending of Sarazanmai gave me indigestion.
Yeah, though I think it's really well handled in the novella, because I mean, part of the thing is that it works really well because of the genders involved. You know, if Hiragi were a girl who like insists on wearing her dead boyfriend's sweatshirt everywhere, people would be like, that's kind of pathetic, but also kind of romantic. But
Right.
because he's a boy wearing a sailor fuku, um, all the adults are like, that's pathetic and worrisome, and all the girls are like, oh, that's so romantic, I could fix him.
It is, I mean,
It's just very well observed.
putting everything else aside, it's very cute. The whole thing is extremely cute, and it is very well observed. And it is another thing where it's like, well, we do in fact all mourn in our own way. And it's the communities that we have around us that give us space and allow us the sort of the grace to mourn in our own ways,
Mm-hmm.
and to sort of to help us and to feed us while we're going through that.
Yes, and in this one, there's also a significant object in this one, which is the thermos.
Isaac ignores this and responds with his catchphrase. What I'm taking away from this is that I need to start wearing a sailor fuku or something.
Well, you know, I mean, the thing is that symbolic gestures that help you process your, you know, grief and or other emotions, yes, can be effective. And if wearing a sailor fuku does help you, then you should do that.
I mean, that
and in some
specific one
cases,
is not going to, it does not have any thematic resonance with any of the rest of the stuff going on in my life, unfortunately.
well, I mean, honestly, it would just be a callback to your college days. So
That's true. That's true. I was reminded once again that there's video evidence of that on YouTube. You'll never find it. Listener,
I didn't realize there was video evidence on YouTube. You have to send me a link.
Okay.
we can cut this part from the podcast. It's just
no. It's
but
important
anyway,
that people know these things.
I do, you know, I don't know. Maybe my takeaway is that we should invite you over for more emotionally significant meals.
I would really appreciate that.
So, but yeah, I mean, like, this stuff is hard, But I think that this book holds up from our college days.
Yes.
Because I think, and also 20 years later, I still think I'm correct that this book is not depressing.
No, it's very much not depressing. Like, I think that it's,
I think the other half
again,
of the class was wrong.
it is so Alexis that you're still.
I remember, and I'm not going to name names, but I still remember this, with the confidence that only a 19-year-old boy at an elite school can do, saying that he definitely thought that he could, empirically show that this book was depressing because he was taking a class entitled Happiness, and thus he knew what he was talking about.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. Well, he was wrong. He was speaking from a position of somebody who's never had the dice roll of fate, land snake eyes directly on him and needed to rebuild using whatever tools were handy. And what this book shows is, or depicts, is the possibility of that rebuilding.
And also...
And the possibility of happiness, comfort, and joy in the process of that rebuilding.
Yes, and also basically that you can be somebody who just isn't very good at connecting with other people. And here's where it also has good neurodivergent themes. And nonetheless, you can still connect with certain other people. It's just a matter of, finding your fellow weirdos.
This podcast also ended up being kind of heartwarming and traditional. Family is where you find it. Yeah, it really is. It really is. And that's that has been a big part of sort of the, foundational philosophy of the way that I've lived my life, which I don't think I got from this book, but, it's nice to see. It was really interesting to me because I remember loving this book, and because of the way that my memory works, distinct from the, still has a very distinct memory of the argument that one had with the guy. The guy being wrong back there, which is forever has a place in Alexis's constellation. But my memory is just I didn't even remember that we discussed this in class before you reminded me. What I remembered was this book is one of the books that is in line with the way that I understand the world. And that's all that I remembered. And rereading it, that is still true.
Yeah.
So.
Good job, Yoshimoto Banana. Good job, Megan Bacchus, the translator. Bacchus.
Indeed. Good job. And still has aged well, I would say.
Yeah. Surprisingly well for a book that has a murdered trans woman that was written in 1988.
Well, transphobia and impending fiscal meltdowns are still with us.
Yes.
And we deal with them.
All right, we have no idea what we're covering next. Oh no, we do. We're doing the Memory Hunters, right?
Yeah, I think we're doing the Memory Hunters. I'm too far into it at this point to not finish it, and it would be a waste not to record a podcast about it. That shows my enthusiasm for that one, folks. But but it'll be a fun discussion, I think.
I think so too. All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Please throw away more of your stuff. Belongings don't necessarily lead to happiness.